Cosmological, then you have the top thin box. This again is just the same as how it'll be for teleological and ontological as well. You need to have, so it's the second bullet point and the third bullet point, please. You need to say in your exam what cosmological means. Cosmological means the study of the universe. Study of is the logical part, universe is the cosmo part. So as soon as you start a cosmological essay, whether it's on Hume or Aquinas, whoever it is, you need to say cosmological means. You also need to say that it's an a posteriori argument. Posteriori is in post, after senses, it's using senses to gather understanding and information, and this is to do with the cosmos or the universe. So you can gain a knowledge about God's existence from using your senses looking to the universe. So first thin box is for what it means and why it's a posteriori. First of your three large boxes then is for the first way of Aquinas, the first way or the unmoved mover. I'll just put the slide up and then you can see how you're going to fill out your box. So the box is the one with the two pictures, the baby with the man. Aquinas' first way, in Summa Theologica, we know this because it's the book where most of his references are found. Summa Theologica, Aquinas has 5 ways. The cosmological is the first 3 ways. You have to know that in your exam. That's pass-fail territory if you do not know which of the ways they are. So it's the first 3 out of the 5. The 5th is the teleological, the first 3 are the cosmological. Unmoved mover, the first way looks at motion, motus, movement. That's why it's called mover. Don't link this to cause and effect because that's the second way. This is all to do with motion and movement. Everything in motion is changing from potential to actual. This state of motion is started and caused by something else. This cannot go back infinitely. Therefore, the first mover is God. God is the unmoved mover. This topic focuses on the idea of infinity. The idea that infinite does not exist. There is no such thing as infinite. There must always be a start and an end point. So because motion cannot go back infinitely into the past, it must start somewhere. That start is God. In your exam, that will get you a D grade. There is not enough on there to get you the high grades. What you need to do in your exam is, other than evaluate of course, is you need to explain this idea of infinity and why things cannot go back infinitely. So the idea there has to be a starting point for Aquinas. You also have to explain why it's called the unmoved mover. So it's a being that moves without moving itself. So it moves things, is the mover, but is unmoved. The unmoved mover does not move. Why? Because then it supports the main attributes of God. Because if God did move, then it's part of the process, it's part of change, and therefore cannot be immutable and not perfect. If God moved, it'd also be part of the process, which means there must be something else that's separate from it. God must be that unmoved agent. Third of all, the other thing that you would need to talk about is just what I've done there by mistake, is you need to link this to Aristotle. You need to say how the influences come from Aristotle's prime mover, how the influences come from the idea of potential to actual and the idea of motion or motors. These are the areas that you must look at in your exam. So I highly advise, if you do have space in that box, to write those things down, because if it comes to revise and you just revise that, you've got a D grade. So you have to look at infinity, you have to make the links to Aristotle, and you have to explain why it's called the unmoved mover and why that's important, as well as of course evaluate. Does anyone have any initial questions or problems with that? All right, second cause, second way is the uncaused causer. Cause and effect exist in the world. This is to do with cause and effect, of course. That's why it's called uncaused causer. If you eliminate cause, you also eliminate its effects, so that you cannot have a last cause nor an intermediate one unless you have a first. That is a quote taken from Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. What it means is you cannot eliminate a cause without also eliminating its effects, because you can't have a last cause, an end cause, or an intermediate middle cause without having a first cause, like a book. You cannot have a middle of a book and an end of a book without the start. And so we are living in the middle of the universe now as far as time is concerned. There will be the end of time, probably when the sun explodes. There has to be a beginning. You can't live in the middle and not have a beginning and an end. And so there must be a middle and an end to have this beginning. That beginning is started by God.
Is that an important quote to have in your exam?
I think that if cosmological comes up, there's very little to actually make your answers look decent. I'd say yes. Once again, it's obvious here and now in the classroom. 5 months' time, when it comes to your exams, give things like the example of the book. You must explain it, though an examiner will not know what you mean with the book example. Also, you have to explain why God is the uncaused causer, how God causes things to happen but is uncaused itself. Why is God uncaused? Because if God had a cause, who caused God? Who caused the thing that caused God, etc. leading to infinite regression. So God himself must be uncaused. Otherwise you lead to infinite regression, which is, according to Aquinas, impossible. Third box, third way, is the contingency and necessity. Everything is contingent, which means relies upon something else for its existence. So, for example, you are contingent on your parents for your existence. We are all contingent on the oxygen given out by trees. We are all contingent because we rely upon other things like food, oxygen, our parents. God, however, cannot be part of that contingent process. There must be a being that's external and separate from contingency, because contingency cannot go back forever. There must be a being that starts it all off that's separate from contingency, and that is a necessary being. Necessary is the opposite of contingent. God must be the necessary being that started it, a being who is self-created. That being again is God. Yeah.
You know what it says? This pattern of contingencies cannot go on infinitely.
Or go back infinitely, yes.
Oh, so it is back.
Yes, yes, or yes. So back or forward. So it has to be there has to be something separate. Yes. So yeah, can't go back infinitely. Yeah.
But you can. So the chain of contingency will continue as things.
He doesn't believe in anything infinite, so he does believe the contingency had a beginning and will have an end.
Right.
But as far as the necessary being, that came first. So this happens at the beginning. But oh no, he doesn't believe in infinity in any stretch of the imagination. Not going backwards nor forwards. There are 3 weaknesses against the process Aquinas is using here. So what Aquinas is saying in all of the 3 arguments is motion cannot go infinitely, God is the unmoved mover. Cause and effect cannot go on infinitely, God is the uncaused causer. We are contingent, cannot go on infinitely backwards or forwards, therefore God is a necessary being. Can anybody tell me one of the 3 weaknesses you could use against that logic? Sam?
It could go on infinitely.
Oh yes, so as far as a weakness of the infinity, I mean more the weakness of the structure of what he's doing to conclude God.
Oh, I mean, like, why does it have to be God? Isn't that what Hugh says?
Yes, he does against the teleological. Let me be clearer. There's 3 types of arguments that can be used against teleological, ontological, problem of it. There's types of arguments that can be used that aren't specific to this but can be used against this. That idea, Sam, is part of a bigger one. Meg?
Is it like the leap of logic?
Yep, leap of logic. How else do we know the leap of logic, though? We don't know it as the leap of logic. Fallacy of composition would work, Sam? Excellent. What is reductio ad absurdum?
It's where he looks at it and he makes a leap of logic, right? Like he reduces it to mean that when it's just his opinion, like it could be Aristotle.
Yeah, excellent. Reductio ad absurdum is reducing logical arguments down to an absurd conclusion. Reductio ad absurdum is one used in ontological. It's a general weakness that can be used against this. You can use reductio ad absurdum against this. Give me another one. So again, you might want to write these down in the box because you remember them now, you might not remember them in the exam. What's another one you can use against this argument, the structure? Reductio ad absurdum.
Would you use Occam's razor against it?
Occam's razor would work, definitely. There are two more obvious ones.
What was the fallacy of composition?
Fallacy of composition is coming up on this PowerPoint, but it's going from examples of things in the universe to suddenly jumping and leaping to the universe as a whole. So then that's the leap of logic. Louisa?
Isn't it like a fallacy with someone similar?
Yes, again, we're trying to predict the PowerPoint. I'm doing something separate from the PowerPoint. There are three general weaknesses that you can use against nearly every single philosophical argument. One is reductio ad absurdum. Plato does it. This world changes, there must be another world that doesn't change. This world is the world of forms. That's a reducing it down to an absurd conclusion. There's two other types of argument, Adam. Burden of proof, excellent. What is the burden of proof, Adam?
Whoever makes the claim has the burden to provide the proof to prove it.
Excellent. Whoever makes the claim has to have the burden to back it up with the evidence. This falls short of the burden of proof. Where's his proof? There's one more. 3 words. What is he doing with God? He's using God as his solution, so he's doing what? God of gaps, excellent. God of gaps, there is a gap, he is putting God into that gap. Very, very good. What you have there is you have 3 weaknesses against the structure alone. Because don't forget, this is where you get your marks in the exam. Your marks are for the evaluation. So you've got reductio ad absurdum, God of gaps, burden of proof. They are your fail-safe weaknesses. You should never be going into that exam in June and thinking I have nothing to criticise it with. Yes, you do. So God of gaps, burden of proof and reductio ad absurdum could be used against most things. Well done. Thank you for being patient with that. All right. Box underneath then, you have 2 large boxes that are split. This is for David Hume. So both of these big boxes are David Hume. The little box attached underneath is for the add-ons, is for the people that add something to it. So the first criticism is this idea that just because things in the universe can be explained through causes, so everything has a cause, everything is in motion, doesn't mean the universe as a whole has a cause or is in motion. This is the fallacy of composition. You can't go from things within the universe to suddenly assume the universe as a whole is affected in that way. So you can't go from motion in the world to suddenly the world is in motion. You can't go from cause and effect in the world to suddenly there must be a cause and effect for the universe. Therefore there's God. You also need to know the meaning of fallacy. I have a feeling if these are going to come up in your exam anywhere, the word fallacy is going to be in your question because they're wanting to throw you off. Fallacy is just a criticism. The dictionary definition that you have on the board is, so this is from the online dictionary, a mistaken belief, especially one based on unsound arguments, a failure in reasoning, rendering an argument invalid. Basically, it's a misbelief based on unsound arguments. Why is it a fallacy? Because you cannot jump to God as your conclusion. So weaknesses presented by David Hume are all fallacies, whether it's teleological or cosmological. Gornillo is using a fallacy against Anselm because he's saying Anselm's logic is not there, it's unsound arguments. So you need to know what the meaning of fallacy is. So this is called the fallacy of composition. You cannot go from things within the universe to the universe as a whole. We have evidence of causes within our world that we can test and study empirically does not mean the universe as a whole has a cause. And he gives the 20 particles. This is all within the top part of the box, not the bit underneath. 20 particles. If you find an explanation for each particle individually, it'd be then wrong to seek an explanation for the whole collection. What it means is, once you've explained everything individually, you then don't have to have an explanation for the whole. So if I explain the existence of each one of you individually, you have a mother, you have a mother, you have a mother, you have a mother, I don't then have to explain everyone has a mother. I don't have to explain everything when you've explained each part individually. So because we explain cause and effect and motion individually in this world, we don't then suddenly need an explanation for the whole lot as well. Yeah. All right, I think we're ready for that one then. So, that's fine. Tiny bit attached underneath is for Bertrand Russell's support. So you've got the box with the bit underneath. The bit underneath is for Bertrand Russell. He supports this by saying that every man has a mother is not proof that the human race has a mother. So again, you can explain each of the individual parts. You can't then generalise to the whole lot. It is insufficient to go from each of the individual parts to the whole universe. So in that way you can't go from the individual cause and effect, individual motion, individual contingency to suddenly look at the whole of it as well. Box to the side is for his second way. This is the fallacy of affirmation of the consequence. So this was the one that you were thinking of, Louisa. Fallacy again, a mistaken in logic. Affirmation of the consequent. Consequent means consequences, outcomes. We assume there is a relationship between cause and effect. We're in a habit of seeing effects and associating them with causes as a matter of logic. Not all effects have causes. Some things are just totally and utterly random. Some things are completely random effects. And so what David Hume is arguing is you cannot associate all effects with causes. We might just be here purely by chance. We don't have to have a cause as to why we're here. It might be pure chance. So affirmation, affirming it, affirming the consequence or affirming the outcome is fine. We are an outcome. You've got the outcome. Doesn't mean you have to assume there's a cause. And that cause certainly doesn't have to be God. Oh, apologies. Don't worry about the question, but you've got the overall. Overall, we have not experienced the creation of the universe. We cannot prove empirically there is a necessary being. All that being is God. Empirical using senses. Box underneath is, so the little bit attached is for J.L. Mackie. J.L. Mackie supports this. Why should people accept that God is the necessary being? Why not just a permanent stock of matter? What that means is, why can't there be just matter that's necessary? Self-caused, always been there. Equally argue that there's a permanent stock of matter whose essence did not involve existence from anything else. Basically, why is it God? Why is God the cause? Why not just matter, collision of particles? That's why we can use Big Bang and steady state in this. Why can't it just be chance? And therefore, you don't have to have the emphasis on the cause. It's just the effect that happens. This is again why Leibniz's sufficient reason comes in as well here. Because he's saying there has to be a sufficient cause. What Hume and Mackie are arguing here is, no, there doesn't have to be a sufficient cause. this question did come up last year as in the AS the first year. The question was something along the lines of, to what extent does Aquinas' cosmological argument successfully prove the existence of a transcendent creator? So it did come up last year. I wouldn't assume because it came up last year that it won't come up this year. I still think it's too obvious to assume that they won't come up again. They might come up again, but if it was Aquinas being successful, they might ask you a Hume's fallacies, which means you might be able to do both teleological and cosmological. Alright, box underneath then is split into 3. You will see from the slide how it works. That is how you split the box up. The 2 is for the 2, the bit underneath is for the writing there. This is now your further weaknesses. So the bit at the top is for analytic statements. You need to know the meaning of that. It crops up all over the place. It crops up in ontological. There's also parts in the Christian thought elements where analytic and synthetic comes into it. Also in religious language this comes in. So analytical statements are statements of reason, and logic is within itself. All bachelors are unmarried men. You cannot disagree with that. You can say all bachelors are married. You're wrong. You're wrong in logic. An analytical statement is true by definition. All cats are felines. All spinsters are unmarried women. Synthetic is when you use names or people. This is when you need to find evidence for them. So Herbert is a bachelor. You would need to find Herbert to go, oh yeah, Herbert's a bachelor. Bertrand Russell uses this logic against Aquinas. What that means is Bertrand Russell did not come up with analytic and synthetic. This is logic of language. Nobody came up with it. This is just how it is. Bertrand Russell applies it though against it. He said only analytic statements are necessary, self-explanatory. God is not necessary. Talking about God is a being, a person, a something. Therefore, you need to find proof of God. Because you can't, it's meaningless. Talk of God as necessary is not analytical, it's synthetic. Because you're talking about a something, God. Therefore, you need to prove it. Because you can't prove God is necessary, it's meaningless. Amir?
What's the difference between analytical statements and tautology?
Tautology in the sense of, I'd say
I know that word came up in religious language.
Tautology is the meaningfulness of language, so both of them would fall under tautology. Yes, so anything that isn't a tautology, looking at the meaningfulness, is not meaningful. So analytic and synthetic are part of a tautology. Yeah. Very good question, Amir. So I think as well under tautology we had things like maths, but maths is analytical. There was also things like ice is icy, so the meaning, the words within it are all tautologies. Yeah. Russell continues as well. Why can't the universe just simply exist without a need for an explanation? That links a bit into Hume's second point. Why do you need a cause? Why are we just not here? Cause and effect will stretch infinitely into the future. Why can't it stretch infinitely into the past? Again, you might not believe cause and effect will go infinitely into the future. Bertrand Russell does. So again, you can support him or criticise him. If God is the explanation for everything and everything requires an explanation, what's the explanation of God? Why do we have to explain the universe, but then not explain God? Finally, why should God be self-explanatory in the way the universe is not? So those last 2 points kind of link together. Take your time, there's a lot of writing on that slide. where it says Russell continues and you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points underneath, the further criticisms he makes, please separate them into your exam essay. Don't clunk them all. They don't make sense on their own. That is not a full sentence. That is just a sentence to help you initiate evaluation. That is not enough for you just to write those and think you'll get the A's. That is purely to whet your appetite, to start the sentence off. You then need to add your critical words. You then need to look at the defence arguments, the further problems with it. You need to use them as a way to actually explore. If you don't know what they mean, don't use them in the exam. As soon as you are happy, though, turn over your sheet. So as soon as you are happy. Box underneath then is for the Big Bang and the steady state theory. The box, the tiny bit attached underneath, is for Aquinas, is the other weakness. So again, separate it just as you find it on the slide. The Big Bang theory is an explanation for the start that doesn't rely upon God. The Big Bang theory, again, it's called a theory for a reason. It's a theory that might be backed up with more evidence, but it's still a theory. It's not called the Big Bang fact, which means you can still criticise it. Many students just write evolution as if it's a fact, or Big Bang as though it's a fact. It's not. There might be slightly more evidence for it, but it's still only a theory. Why? Because nobody was there at the beginning of time. The Big Bang can explain the start of the universe. About 15 billion years ago, there was a dense concentration of matter and energy. This mass of energy exploded, blasting particles and energy outwards. The matter then concentrated into hot lumps we call stars. These stars are clustered into galaxies. The debate rests on whether or not the cause of the Big Bang, though, was natural or divine. Big Bang. Basically, did the Big Bang just happen, or did God cause the Big Bang? Yes, it would go against the Adam and Eve and creation stories, but very few Christians are creationists. Very few Christians believe the Adam and Eve story word for word, literally. You can be a Christian and believe in the Big Bang. For an examiner marking your work, if I was marking your work in summer, the Big Bang is one of those really obvious areas for weak students. Why? Because students don't learn it properly and learn the words associated with it. They just blag the Big Bang. Don't be a Big Bang blagger. You have to know your words. So you have to know about the 15 million, the mass of energy, the blasting particles, the hot lumps, the concentrated matter. You have to use the right language if you're going to use it. If you just say there was a bang and it was big, because believe me, I have read that in the past in exams, it's not good enough. This is one area where an examiner really will judge whether you are that A and B student or not. If you are not happy using the Big Bang, I actually recommend using the steady state theory instead. Don't use them both. You only need one or the other. I recommend the steady state theory. Why? Because it's less obvious. Not all students learn the steady state theory, which means that you don't have to be as flashy with your words. The steady state theory was created by Bondi, Gold and Hoyle. Basically, it argues that energy is not created. You cannot create energy. All that's happening is energy is redistributed. So at the beginning of time, there was just energy. And the energy moved, and at certain points that energy collided, causing the universe to be created. So it's the idea that undermines the cosmological argument, because it wasn't caused, it was simply the redistribution of energy that created the universe. The box underneath, Aquinas said infinity was impossible, but isn't God infinite?
It's a long box as well.
Yeah, long skinny one. You can do lots of exclamation marks. So why again can God be infinite and not just the universe itself? One rule for one rule for another.
Can you make links to the whole Prometheus shebang, or is that just...
No, absolutely fine. You can bring Boethius in. As long as you don't go too much of a tangent, you make it relevant to whether you're arguing for or against the question. So as long as you don't just stick a big Boethian paragraph in there, you either use Boethius to support Aquinas, you use Boethius to go against or for the question. Brilliant. Yeah, high level. That's all about control, though. It's always remembering, what is it I'm arguing? Why am I bringing it in? Yeah, definitely.
Amy,
Yeah.
how does that point of Aquinas link to those theories then?
Because they can't be infinite.
Yeah.
The
So do you mean the
Big
bottom
Bang,
box?
Yeah, I don't understand that they only happened once at the start of the universe, so...
No, I think the theory of the Big Bang is like it's the Big Bang and the Big Crunch, right?
Yeah, the Big Bang of the... Are you meaning the bottom box where it's got to do with the top two?
Links, yeah.
Oh, no, there's just a different weakness, hence why it's in a different
So
box.
they're not related at all?
No. No, so what all that's saying is, so you can link it the way that Sam said. No. No, they're not attached. It was just simply because it was a random weakness that I didn't have a slide to put it on.
It's linked to the steady state theory though.
But it is, yes, the idea that infinity, the idea that it could have just been an infinite amount of energy. Yeah, definitely, Sam, very good. So you can link it maybe still with the idea of infinite energy. Box underneath then is for, let's just have a look at these. You have Leibniz's sufficient reason. Now, this argument, so it's got a large box, this argument is defending the cosmological argument. Students find this quite a frightening idea, but actually it's very, very clever. So don't be put off by the name of it or the name of the thinker, who has a very impressive wig. The cosmological argument rests on certain principles of causation. Causation is a really posh way of saying cause and effect. Leibniz is a person.
Yeah, who's he supporting?
Say again?
Who's he supporting?
Aquinas, so this is supporting cosmological, or can be used to support cosmological. In particular, that any existent thing must have a cause or reason for its existence. So cosmological rests on the idea that anything that exists must have a cause or a reason for its existence. Everything must have a cause, basically. This is what Leibniz points out and what he calls his principle of sufficient reason, that there cannot be more in the effect than there is in the cause. Now, Leibniz is not directly supporting Aquinas, but can be used to support Aquinas. And it's a very clever argument, but it's basically saying that the effect that we're living in now, the universe being here, is amazing. What we experience today is fantastic. It can't just be then, oh, chance, total fluke that this amazing thing is here. No, there has to be more in the cause, there has to be sufficient reason as to why it is like it is, other than just chance, other than just particles colliding together, other than just redistribution of energy. There must be more in the cause because the effect is so amazing. That's the argument from Leibniz that goes in that box. Meg?
How would you like to evaluate that then?
Well, do you agree or disagree? So do you agree that every effect must have a greater or equally as good cause, or could things just be chance? If you believe that things are just chance, fluke, random, then you wouldn't agree with this. That what this is arguing is that because what we experience is so amazing, there must be an equally or greater reason why it is here. And so you could equate that to God more than to chance. So basically you're just arguing whether you agree with that or not. Louisa?
Not really to lead with logic.
Go on.
Like, you know, like you can see that things that have effects are smaller than the cause, kind of like in the world. Like if you got like a bouncy ball and you went smacked against what, it jumped less high than you whacked it, so that's the cause. So kind of, but then that's because
That's
you've
what he's
seen that.
saying.
Yeah, I know. So kind of that's like leaving logic. So why are you assuming that that's how?
So no, I think Louisa, are you arguing that sometimes the effects are bigger than the cause?
Well, yeah, like sometimes like this is a really random. I don't know.
No, you could. So the idea of you might push a ball gently and then it rolls quicker down a hill or something like
If I was
that.
thinking like an explosion. Because
Yeah.
Like, if it's like a tiny, it's like a spark. But you
Oh, so like an atomic bomb.
So that's
So
just
it's a
like
tiny something
then
that.
it like blows up a city.
Oh,
It's
fair
like-
enough. Yeah, I think that's a
that
good
effect is
example.
bigger than the cause.
Yeah, fine. That's a perfectly valid argument against this. That actually sometimes the effects, such as an atomic bomb, is bigger than the cause, which is actually just powder that.
Well, it doesn't know. It doesn't.
Go on.
Well, the energy for the explosion was there.
Yeah, it wasn't. But
Yeah,
like,
but
if you set a bomb off and use lighter fuse, that's like
Yeah,
a spark.
the cause is the elements, the chemical elements like explosion, like chain
But the
reaction.
effect is the destruction of an entire system.
Yeah.
Which is a bit bigger than
Like it's bigger than the cause, so he's wrong.
Yes, so he's
Yeah,
wrong.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah, no, but that's good. So what you've just said there is that the effect is
So,
bigger than the
you didn't
cause.
know about chain reaction.
So yeah, chain reactions, exactly. So that goes against Leibniz and again then supports the idea of Hume's second weakness, that there's sometimes effects are bigger than the cause, or sometimes things don't even have a cause. Yeah. Does that make sense, Meg? So they're criticising against Leibniz's sufficient reason, because this is arguing that the cause has to be greater or equal to the effect that we're living. And what the example of the atomic bomb is, the atomic bomb is a tiny little powder with a light reaction that might explode, vaporising millions. That effect is clearly way bigger than the cause. Yeah. Last slide, last box. You have three on the board, so take your time, work your way through them. 3 boxes, 3 on here. The strengths weaknesses you're going to do yourself. The get off the fence you're going to do as well. So the 3 boxes is the 3 on the board. These are the 3 supporters of the cosmological argument. You have the argument from contingency from Frederick Copleston. You are lucky with the new spec that you no longer have to learn Copleston. Copleston is now an extra. He used to be a whole part of the spec. He basically says exactly what Aquinas says in his third way. Frederick Copleston had a famous radio debate with Bertrand Russell, where Bertrand Russell used a lot of the earlier points. Copleston argues that objects in the world depend on something else for their existence, they're contingent. Therefore, an explanation for existence of everything in the universe must be external, so it must be separate from contingency. There must be a being that's self-explanatory, and this is a necessary being. That necessary being is God. So Frederick Copleston is basically just supporting Aquinas' third way by saying pretty much the same thing.
Why must it be external?
Because if it's not external, then it's also part of the
Contingency.
contingency, exactly. Good question, and that's again something you'd have to then explain in your exam. The Calem argument is much more interesting, especially one because it's presented by Muslim scholars, so this is a Christian argument, yet presented by Muslim scholars, Al-Kindi and Al-Ghazali. What they argue is that everything has to have a beginning, including the universe. It cannot go on infinitely, therefore there must be a God that willed it. Again, all these supporters are saying exactly the same or very, very similar to Aquinas, focusing on the idea of infinity, focusing on the idea that everything has to have a beginning. Finally, William Lane Craig, very interesting. William Lane Craig started out as an atheist, a very open, debating atheist, used to go on debates, and then he changed his mind and thought, I have no answers. There was a famous debate online, but basically he got presented with some questions and he thought, I don't know the answer to that. And then the light bulb came on and he thought, actually, I think God maybe exists. And so what he says is there's no such thing as infinite. Infinity, though we know, does exist. What is infinite?
Circle.
A circle is infinite. Something else within maths. Pi. Okay? Pi is infinite. A pi number is infinite. So immediately William Lane Craig's argument falls apart. There is no such thing as infinity. William Lane Craig is still alive as well, so he's got no excuse not to know about pi. Fair enough, Aquinas might not have known the pi numbers, but William Lane Craig has no excuse. If the universe is not infinite, there must be a beginning. The only decent thing about William Lane Craig's point really is that he calls it a personal, bless you, a personal being, not God. He doesn't call it God, he calls it a personal being.
You don't have to use that, Frederick, do you?
No,
I don't like it.
no, fine, don't have to use Copperson if you don't want to. To be honest with you, use one of them. One of the arguments, you don't have to use all three, use one of them in your exam. Don't forget to evaluate them. Strengths or weaknesses. That's cosmological done. Does anyone have any cosmological related questions? Fantastic, well done.